Welcome to our webinar on SEO and why content matters. My name is Melissa Sheehan. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer with Adcelerant, and joining me is Sam Rahimi. He is our SEO Director, and we're really excited to talk with you a little bit today about SEO. In today's environment, content really matters, and driving folks to your website is more important than ever. We'll get started today with some intros, talk a little bit about how businesses can benefit from organic SEO, effective strategies, some pro tips, and then we'll end with a Q&A. If you have any questions as we go along here, don't be afraid to put those in the Q&A box. And we'll get to those at the very end when we open it up. You can go ahead and put those in there, and we'll make sure we get to everyone. So as I said, my name is Melissa, and Sam has joined us as well. Sam, if you'll say hello.
Hey guys, how's it going?
We are a digital technology company. Adcelerant works in order to bring digital solutions, and our mission is to bring them to every small business. And the way that we do that is we work with media companies and agencies in order to make sure and connect you with the latest and greatest ad technology. We're an award-winning technology company, and we have a proprietary total digital agency software solution that helps our partners scale their sales, operations, and reporting in a single toolkit. We were very proud to be recognized as the 83rd fastest growing company in the US on the Inc. magazine Inc. 5000 list. And we're a proud member of the Local Media Consortium. Our network is over 300 local media partners and agencies in 5 countries and 400 cities. And we're very excited that we still have maintained our 80 staff members here at Adcelerant, even during these difficult times, who are standing by to really operate the best ad campaigns possible. So what do we do for our partners? We offer that cutting edge technology, professional services, and advertising platforms among programmatic display, video, radio, and organic search. That's really where we're going to focus today. We're going to talk a lot about how to optimize your website in order to show up better in Google's search engines. I'll kick it over to Sam now to talk about the benefits of search engine optimization, and just give you a little bit of background on how all that works.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. So hello, everyone. I think, you know, in order to get into this conversation, it's important that we always remember what SEO is kind of at its foundation, why it's important, how it can support multiple channels across the board, not just itself, right? And of course, as many of you know, content is a big player within the SEO space, particularly when we talk about organic SEO. The way that we at Adcelerant at least define organic SEO is kind of the on-site experience, right? What is the website doing to and for us in order to increase our overall visibility, our ability to show up in front of a relevant audience, to track that audience and retain them or convert them within the website. The overall goal with SEO is always going to be, whether we're talking about local, SERP SEO, organic SEO, across the board, the goal is to always drive traffic, right? We want to expand our visibility overall, and you can do that in a lot of different ways. At this time, it's not just about your website, right? But in order for this to happen, the bridge, right, the bridge between who shows up and or what somebody types in rather, and who shows up is really content, and that's what we're going to be getting into today. So when we get into kind of some of the elements that we have here on this page, the importance of organic SEO. 40% of revenue on average is captured by organic traffic. It's important we're always thinking about what drives revenue, right? We always have to take it back to the bottom line, and how organic SEO specifically is involved in that, but more specifically than that, how content plays that role, right? Revenue oftentimes will come from conversion. Conversion oftentimes, and this is really just an example, will come from calls to action, CTAs, right? Inspiring people to take action. One of the things that I thought of the other day is it reminded me of Chutes and Ladders. If you guys remember that game, I don't know why this came to mind, but I remember just days and days of playing that game consistently as a kid. And I will tell you, it is the same. right? The ladders are, getting a customer engaged, getting them to contact you, seamlessly having them navigate your site. That's what's going to lead them up the ranks and drive us towards revenue. Standalone content, dated content that maybe excludes these calls to action, these conversion points, these are the shoots, right? They're hindering opportunity, they're hindering performance. We always need to ensure that our content is developed and designed to support this overall goal. 60% of Google searches are done via mobile devices. We also always need to have mobile in mind, not just when we're developing a site, which many people developing sites these days do have in mind, but also developing content, right? We often talk about relevancy. Developing content for people who search online is a form of creating relevancy, right? The way that you search on a mobile device is different than the way that you search on a desktop device. We're in different environments, different scenarios, different settings when we're searching on desktop versus mobile, right? We always have to have this kind of at the forefront of our thought process to ensure that again, that content, not just the plan itself, but the execution of that work is aligned accordingly. 91.5%, or I guess it's 92% of traffic are going to be captured by page one, right? Ranking on page one. Everyone says it, we say it. Ranking on page one is going to be important. It's going to remain important. And 46% of all searches are seeking local information. So local SEO helps you rank on page one, right? All of our partners will know this. If they've heard me talk to it, I probably preach this at this point. And it's important to note that listings or listing sites, namely Google, hope to kind of be the last stop for the conversion, right? They want you to find whatever you're looking for on their site, on their platform, and convert. So offering more ways to showcase content within these platforms is something that they're inevitably going to do and are already doing. And we need to ensure that this is part of the kind of the process here. So if you're trying to show up on page one, local is an additional way to supplement this. And you've probably heard us speak to these products in tandem, these tactics in tandem, and that's exactly why. We can hop to the next slide there. So as we kind of continue on this discussion with SEO, it's always important to remember, though, that search engines work off of algorithms, right? Search engines are machines in essence, and they determine who ranks where, and that determination is changing constantly. There are two kind of primary factors that we saw become more emphasized in 2019. The first one being higher backlinks, the second being kind of this longer, longer form content. These are critically important things. And this is why we have adjusted, and everyone needs to adjust their SEO campaigns accordingly. When we talk about backlink authority, essentially what we're looking at here is how others link to you, right? That is a massive ranking factor. For Google, at least, it is one of their top three among many. Backlinks are one of their top three ranking factors. You can build links on your own, right? But a great way of building links naturally is to create great content. I mean, think about the way that you guys navigate the web, right? A simple example would be if you pop onto Facebook or Twitter, or these days it seems like TikTok. You find the same content, right? Time and time again. It'll loop back around, you view it, it'll loop back around again. And these are simple examples because we tend to be on social platforms on a regular cadence. That's a natural form of kind of increase in visibility, an increase in linking, an increase in authority. When a lot is pointing to you, you're ultimately going to see that benefit you within the search engine results. And then stronger, longer form content. This is something that we've also been talking about for quite some time now, but we need to make sure that our content is relevant and resourceful, right? We can't just put out content to put out content. In a lot of ways, that's a good supporting role, right? We'll find for here and there, business owners are interested in having their own blog. They want to provide news releases or some sort of press release type format within their own site. general updates about the business. This is all fantastic. You need to do these things. This is natural marketing, natural branding. But when it comes to the content that's designed to capture capture traffic for the purposes of educating, informing, transacting, whatever the end goal might be, that content needs to be a little bit longer form in a lot of cases. It needs to be answering all the questions, not just from A to C, but from A to Z, right? And that's why when we say longer form content, we're not simply talking about the concept of expanding that content, right? This isn't a middle school term paper where you're saying, oh, it's got to be 500 words. Let's just go ahead and put if and you and are in there a couple more times to get it out to that word count, right? It needs to be well thought out, well planned, kind of covering the full scope of a topic and its subtopics, and that's ultimately how you're going to see results, right? I mean, think about it again in your own scenario when you are conducting searches. Let's say you're trying to find out how to unclog a sink, something very, very simple. Right. Ultimately, what you do is you go to Google, you go somewhere to find resources for that, but you slowly make your way down the funnel, maybe not even realizing it, oftentimes realizing you need a specific tool, you need a specific tactic, you need a certain fluid, whatever that might be, whatever that solution is, you are finding those answers. If the content isn't offering that, search engines will know, searchers will know, and they'll move on to the next best option. And more often than not, that's your competition, right? So content is critically important to capturing this traffic. So as we get into some more of the specifics, it's important to kind of understand the relationship between content and SEO. We find many clients will tell us, Sam, I've been creating SEO. I'm sorry, I've been creating content. I've got a blog. I do some keyword research and such like that. I'm a plumber, so I put the keyword plumber here and there, and they kind of assume that box is checked for the most part, right? But the reality is that you might have clients putting loads of effort into something that's not really moving the needle for them. Right, which is important to understand because there's a marriage that has to happen between the two, between content and SEO, and what that kind of give and take looks like is determined really by an overall holistic style strategy. So you can't really keep them in their own buckets, right? SEO is narrower, right, and more technical, whereas content is broader and more holistic. There is no such thing as SEO without content. You've probably heard us or maybe others say this before, but you oftentimes need the text, the articles, the substance, the keywords, the verbiage to ultimately make sure that you are showing up, not just showing up period, but showing up the right way. Right? We'll talk through what search terms a client might be ranking for and find that it is wildly irrelevant to their business or their core business goals. That is a result of not having these things front of mind. Content is adding value unless people search and find it. In order to make it visible, SEO is required, and bringing these two together alone, they're often ineffective. So again, just kind of hammering home the point that content and SEO can't live in silos, right? They have to be working together, and that's where all the strategic thought comes from. We'll get into some of the details of this as we move forward. So content creation is the simple practice of developing content. Right now, when we talk about content, I think you guys maybe already have this kind of teetering around in your minds. What do we mean by this? Right? Content is essentially everything. It is essentially everything under the sun within your website. It could be a blog, it could be a new core web page, it could be a services page, a contact us page, a video, a how-to guide, an infographic, a quiz, an interactive element. These are all designed to, again, be the bridge between what somebody types into Google and Google showing you to that person, right? We create loads and loads of content for our client, but it's never nearly as successful when the client isn't involved, right? We can do the research, right? We conduct loads of keyword research to identify the search terms that we want to be ranking for, that we should be ranking for, that are the most opportune for us to rank for. We conduct competitive research to understand what the competition in our market and industry are doing, right? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Where's the gap within that? So that we can ultimately expose opportunities. Sometimes you'll end up getting into discussions with SEOs, and they'll say something along the lines of, well, what are your top 50 keywords? What are your top 20 keywords? Look at your ranking for all these keywords. But the reality of that type of correspondence is that you ultimately are being kind of funneled into your own thought process, right? If you have this kind of mentality about your business, that's all well and good, but we cannot kind of pigeonhole ourselves into this, into these efforts. Otherwise, we often may end up just spinning our wheels. If I'm an attorney, right, let's say I do criminal law, I probably want to rank for criminal law, Denver, Colorado. Sure, of course. That makes perfect sense to me, and I'm sure it makes perfect sense to anybody else. But the reality of this situation is that we are not the only ones trying to do the same. And when we're talking about SEO, it is this matter of being able to expose those opportunities and put the effort in the right and most optimal place, right? Search engine optimization, we're trying to be optimal here. So putting the effort in the right place in order to show traction. And oftentimes the best place, the optimal place to put effort is these kind of, I call them side door or backdoor approaches to keyword rankings. Instead of ranking for criminal law, I want to rank for a specific type of crime. And the specific search terms that somebody who is looking for a criminal attorney will type into Google. Right? That's how we start to bridge this gap. That's how we start to showcase our authority, our resourcefulness within our space, within our market, within our industry to search engines and searchers alike. And then we can take the stepping stones towards a keyword such as criminal law in Denver, Colorado. I hope that makes sense. And Melissa, am I explaining this right? I think ultimately it's just identifying the path to the most successful space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really aligning yourself with the business's goals and making sure that we have the expertise to bring how we can accomplish those goals in a unique way that differentiates them.
That's actually an awesome point. I'm glad you mentioned that because it totally slipped my mind. Where we kind of started this tangent from was ultimately having the client involved. That's also another reality, right? We can understand by the research where we need to go, but it's critically important that we're involved in what the business is trying to achieve. Now, again, there's going to be a bit of a feedback loop. You can say you want to do A, and we're going to suggest you should do B. But we need to understand what the business is trying to achieve. And in some cases, we need to take into account specific business initiatives, seasonality, whatever that certain business, that certain space and time are going through to ultimately align with what we're doing. So yeah, great point there. So as we kind of consider, continue to consider kind of content's role in here, one other thing that's always important to touch on is this first point here, and this is, I swear this is a true fact. It is straight from, I'm going to forget the name of the NCES. 88% of people in the United States read and write at an 8th grade reading level or lower. It surprised me as well. It is a very surprising fact, but for that reason, you kind of have to lead with a very basic level of content, right? And it's not to say, as we kind of mentioned here, it's not about the readers aren't able to, kind of read complex verbiage, right? It's rather that they might not be able to comprehend it fully. They might not be able to grasp the themes and ideas that kind of come with that topic, that subtopic. So as a result, we have to be, we kind of have to be, working accordingly, developing the content accordingly. And we also have other content types available, but it is something that you have to manage on a case-by-case basis. If I'm in, let's say, the medical space, and I, I'm a doctor and I conduct, a certain, let's say I'm a foot and ankle doctor, right? If I am a patient, a potential patient of someone like that, I probably go to Google and say chronic foot pain, chronic ankle pain, something along these lines, right? But the reality is that, you know, a medical physician is thinking, okay, you need to, you know, we need to rank for all these medical terms, right? This is critically important. This is how our people are going to find us. Probably not, right? And we always have to think about that. We always have to make sure we're aligning expectations accordingly. Now, in some cases, yes, this does apply, right? B2B is a great example. You need to speak the language of your customers, but that's not always the case. So in order to move forward with content, we do require some of the items that you see here: the discussions, the onboarding conversations, insights from the client, feedback, always important. That ultimately helps us create what's essentially a style guide, a list of rules in order to follow. This is something that everyone that's developing content should be doing on a regular basis. So I'll kick it back over to Melissa, and we can kind of start to get into you know, some of the more specific strategies that we see success on when it comes to content development. Also things to kind of keep in mind as you're getting into the development process.
Thanks, Sam. You know, we often get asked the question, what does good content look like for my website? And, you know, that's a really broad question, because these days you have two different groups that you have to talk to. You have to speak to your target market, your customer. And you also have to speak to those search engines. And in some cases, those search engines are what brings you to your customer. And so you have this kind of duality that you have to make sure you're always keeping in mind that your content is engaging. We interact with content every single day. It's important to us. You know, we're constantly checking, especially these days, what's going on in the news. How do I get access to this information, or to do things with my kids, or to do things as a family. And that is what brings us, you know, to your customer, and it also connects those dots. To making sure that that content is relevant is really important. Making sure that content is engaging, that it inspires action. You know, Sam talked a little bit ago about how it leads to revenue. Inspiring action, having a call to action. What do you want people to do when they get to your website? And then tying what those customers are searching for, making sure that if you have somebody who is searching for something specific, like things to date night during quarantine or date night during COVID, do you have an article that is really relevant, engaging, and ties to what somebody might be searching for in today's world? Making sure that you hit all three of those buttons. Sam,
Yeah, for
tell us
sure.
a little bit more about, you know, how that interacts on the search engine side as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, I mean, when it comes to, it comes to kind of the alignment between what somebody types in and what we show up for, you obviously need to make sure that you're, again, conducting your research. You have to kind of, the way that I always start doing this is kind of think about the way that you interact with content yourself. I mean, even right now, think about what content you interacted with online over the last week. I have probably 10 different examples. I know I was reading an SEO case study yesterday to kind of just, for the purposes of just kind of educating myself. I read consistently about stocks and finance, right? For kind of like buy, sell recommendations. I read through a product review about a tent. These are the types of things that tend to show a lot of value for us. Now, this reapplies all over the place, whether it's at-home workouts, home service, like, roofing, HVAC, these types of things, software technology, retail, clothing. I mean, skateboards, drones, the specifics, you can get into kind of the specifics, and it goes down many, many rabbit holes, right? But everyone is searching for something different. Everyone's searching for something specific. They're all looking for answers, and they're all looking for efficiencies. Right, and I think that's one of the things to keep in mind. Now, obviously, when we think about how content is developed, and we're going to get into some of this on the next slide as well, you kind of have to think it in the format of a funnel. You have to think about it in the format of where somebody is within their search journey, and then you ultimately need to provide solutions with each one of those elements. Right, so if we hop over to the next slide, we'll actually get into that a little more specifically. We kind of touch on that in more detail.
Yeah, so the various types of content that you know, these are what helps a business accomplish its goals. And, you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, how we connect with a business to make sure that we are aligned with their goals. And the content strategy should align really well. Think about your customer's customer. You know, all of us, you know, media companies and advertisers work with customers in order to help them achieve their goals. But we also have to think about, how do their customers think about their business? What do they search for? And when they're in the market, what do they search for when they're just starting their research? And that can be a great prospecting tool as well. So if you're looking around at, you know, an HVAC company or a restaurant or whatever it might be, think about how you as a consumer would find that business. What would you search for? You may be searching for really specific things, and it kind of depends on where you're at in your customer journey. So that's really important, is thinking about that customer journey, what types of searches may be relevant. And this can help you see, are they showing up for those today? And could this be a need for them? And then that helps drive the content strategy as well. You know, Sam, tell us about how we put together that content strategy.
Yeah, so you kind of have to think about it in the format of some of the items that we have here on this slide. So to give you an example, we always have to start off with kind of an understanding of what our core content is versus our supplemental content. And this does kind of lean itself into a search funnel and how people tend to work within a search funnel. When we talk about core content, we're really talking about, like, let's say what you see in the navigation bar of a website. Right? Oftentimes, most cases, it's going to be like an About Us page, services page, product pages, contact us, these types of things. Whereas a supplemental page is more along the lines of something that is a blog, right? Something that's a resource page, maybe something that's not so specific to the products and services that you provide. If I can give you an example, a supplemental content piece would be summer fashion trends of 2020. Right? But a core content piece would be summer dresses. So we think about this in the form of a funnel, in the form of a hierarchy within a website, and then ultimately you can identify a few different ways that people are going to enter that website. Now, if somebody's super high funnel, they're trying to search for fashion trends of 2020. Maybe it's it's a boyfriend looking for a gift for a girlfriend in terms of fashion, and he's just doing very, very high level research. Right? This is ultimately the types of search terms they're going to search for. They want trends. They want to be ahead of the curve. They want products that are ahead of the curve. Where they're going to convert is when they move down funnel. They're going to convert on those core pages, summer dresses, right? Tops, whatever it is. This is ultimately the thought process that has to go into every kind of content strategy. You have to kind of think of it, how it fits in a specific funnel. Kind of keeping that funnel approach in mind, actually go back one slide, I apologize. Kind of keeping that funnel approach in mind, it's important to kind of create content, as we mentioned, accordingly, to ensure you're kind of capturing traffic throughout that journey. So we've got the example that you have here really should speak for itself, but we've got informational, commercial, transactional, navigational, and local content. Hopefully some of you guys have heard of these terms before, but these are really the different categorizations of different types of content, and also search terms, right? Keywords are oftentimes a good way to allude to a content topic. And the example that I have here, I think, is a good one as well. So an informational level, someone's going to Google and they're typing in blenders, right? Nothing specific to it. Talking about blenders. They could be talking about, compact blenders or industrial sized blenders or blender sunglasses, right? There's not enough context there to be full-fledged sure, but we need to make sure we have content that's developed to support that. When we kind of come down that funnel, we get into the commercial side of things. Oh, okay, they're talking about compact blenders. Now that I've, as a searcher, done plenty of research, I realize I want something compact. Right. Now I'm almost ready to convert, but I need to know like what brands are going to be best for me. Top blenders, blender brands. That's where you get into this transactional intent. Navigational is when you probably start appending branded terms to it. Okay, I've read an article about the top blender brands of 2020. Now I think I want a magic bullet. Right. And once I'm ready to convert, And sometimes you don't even get to the local level of the funnel, but once I'm ready to convert, I might type in Magic Bullet Blender, and I'm expecting results of stores where I can purchase this product in my local area. The content needs to align, right? The keywords need to align. And that's why it's important to ensure that there is a consistent content strategy. We're talking about one single topic here, right? And if you consider how many services, how many products some of our customers offer, you can replicate this process across the board many times over. And you can replicate it again as you get into the following year. Right, so there's always content opportunity. There's always opportunity to freshen that content. One of the examples that so hopefully some of you guys have heard me use is, well, first off, search engines love freshness, and you see this on a daily basis. Right, and search engines in the news section, as well as in social networks, social channels, are really, really good at this. And what we tend to do is, if you were to hop onto Google and you were to type in, let's say, I know it's a semi-sensitive topic possibly, but if you were to go to Google and type in Corona, right, you're probably not going to get too much about the beer. You're probably going to get more about coronavirus. Right? Similarly, if a hurricane rolls through your area and I type in hurricane, I'm probably not going to get the definition of what it is. I'm probably not going to get informational content about it. I'm going to get some news related items, right? This is how search engines work. They latch on to fresh topics and new ideas, trending topics. We see this in social all the time. And these are important things. Now, these are grand examples, but these happen very much at the micro level, at the market specific and industry specific levels. And that's why content is kind of this ever flowing, ever changing, but consistent tactic within SEO. So to kind of get into some tips or things I might keep in mind, if you're ready to get to a point where you need to execute, and our team does follow this as well, so obviously you'll see it on their end, but you want to keep in mind some of these tips and specifically ways to kind of stand out from the competition. So if we can hop to the next slide. So the first thing that I always like to mention, and you hear this all the time, but we have to be an extension of a client's marketing team or marketing initiatives, right? The reality is that people say this in some cases just to sound good, right? But with SEO, it is a requirement. We need to be just off the hip of our clients. We need to be understanding the moves that they're ready to make, what they're trying to achieve, what challenges they're running into. There needs to be a consistent feedback loop. Being involved in the content generation process cannot go underemphasized. You always want to have a plan and be prepared to kind of flex to that plan to make sure you're capturing timely traffic. Also, it's helpful to kind of create content that's objective and conversational and simply promotes the brand, voice, tone, these types of things that I mentioned earlier. That should always be happening, ideally alongside some of the more specific initiatives that are designed to capture more traffic. Right. So whereas we might develop a content strategy for you and say, you should be focusing on these 6 content pieces, they're going to cover these topics, but feel free to continue to develop let's say a blog section, a testimonial section, whatever it is that you've been doing up until this point. Do it in tandem with what we're doing. Wonderful. Keep that up. That's a really, really great way to supplement all the efforts that we're doing. Research. The third bullet here, conduct the necessary research. Do the keyword research, do the competitive research, identify the gaps, the search trends, the seasonality. All of these things need to be taken into consideration. If I am let's say a plumber, and I want to write a content piece about winterizing your home, we probably wouldn't be doing ourselves many favors if we released that content piece in let's say, March, right? Early spring. That doesn't really apply. It doesn't align with search trends. It doesn't align with what people are looking for. So we need to make sure we have these things in mind. Timeliness is critical. Remember, search engines latch on to trending topics. Use your resources. Think about what you all have at your disposal, whether it's experts in the field, testimonials, the data that you can access, conducting your own analyses to generate unique content. You always want to have SEO in mind with these things as well. Lean on the resources that you have here in front of you. Make sure that it's aligned with the research, the technical elements. Or lean on an SEO team to kind of keep those things in mind for you. But in order to do that, kind of very synergistically, you have to be involved. We have to be involved, kind of moving in parallel. Diversify the content, diversify the format specifically. Now, when we're developing content, we oftentimes will be pushing for like specific copy, right? How-to guides, blog posts, whatever it may be. But I always recommend diversifying, whether that's video, a podcast seems to be popular more and more these days, getting quotes from experts in your field, from customers, such as testimonial, conducting your own research to develop statistics that can be distributed. Whatever it might be, every business sits in its own unique space and can offer those up. Continue to update and revise. One of the things that I mentioned is the kind of the idea of quote unquote taking profits, right? Reinvesting portions of what content does for your revenue back into the quality and types of content that you're offering is something that we should always have in mind from the get-go. If you kind of think about, if I can use the example of like a YouTuber, right? Once they begin, if I were to start YouTubing a YouTube channel tomorrow, I'd probably use my phone, right? Not the highest quality device in the world for video production. But as I were to gain a following, maybe monetize this thing, and kind of develop the value of it, I can upgrade, right? I'll reinvest into better software, better technology in order to better my offering, right? That's ultimately what we kind of need to think about when you're doing content development. And then, of course, the last thing I want to note is make sure you're not creating content in a vacuum. This is something that we touched on earlier. If content's just kind of sitting on your site to sit on your site and be forgotten about, it's probably not doing as much as it can. And you always want to be thinking about this in relation to other marketing channels. So as we get into, oh, sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
No, sorry about that. We're going to talk a little bit more about SEO prospecting because we really want to give you some tips as media companies on who you should be talking to these days about SEO. Who is it most important to, and what types of conversations should you be having? When prospecting and selling SEO, there's a few things to keep in mind. It's imperative you're talking to the right people. Confirming that driving traffic will be valuable to them. Driving traffic to their website is the main goal of SEO. And making sure that you can kind of take them through a few questions and ask them if you can get access to either their Google Analytics or get access to some more information about their website on the back end. Their Google Search Console is what that's called. And make sure that you are talking with the business owner and that they are knowledgeable, that they know who is even designed their website and who is their webmaster. Those are conversations that we really have to have up front. Like I said earlier, do a couple of searches for key things that you as a consumer would search for about their business. That can really help you identify, do they have a need? Are they showing up for this? That can be a door opener in some cases. And then ask them, how are people finding your website today? They should kind of know the answer to those questions. How are people finding their business today? They might say Google, or they might say, Google Maps. And, are they satisfied with the number of people that are coming and that are either coming to their website or coming through their door? If they would like more people to come into their business, as most of them would, how would that translate to more revenue? right? And those are questions that'll lead them back to the ROI that you could help with them with if you're able to drive more traffic to their website, more traffic to their storefront. And then, talk to them about their current website challenges. What do they want to change about their website? And, like I said, getting that Google Analytics and the Search Console access can really allow our team to do some investigation and help you with some investigation. With some questions rather, in order to ask them and move them further down the sales funnel. There are some great tools that can help you. WooRank, Ahrefs, SEMrush, those are all tools that can kind of help you identify pain points or challenges with a website. Sam, anything else that you would suggest as far as those tools are concerned, or what to look for when you're using a tool like that?
Yeah, I think those tools are some good examples. They do have free versions, guys. I know some of them will kind of limit how much you can use there. I think other things to kind of understand are simply things to kind of look for within a site. One of the things that I simply like to look for is just how much content do they have. Right? We keep kind of pushing for this, but you have to kind of understand, are they doing this on a regular cadence? Especially now, this is really important, because what we found, especially as we're kind of heading into COVID-19, was that people were starting to kind of cut back on certain budgets here and there, right? Of course, they had to be, kind of play it safe to some degree, but they were falling back on their organic presence, which is essentially what SEO is designed to fuel. And typically oftentimes they realized that they were falling back on a shaky foundation at best. So make sure that you're able to identify within a website, just simply by poking around, is this enough? Right? You saw me talk or heard me talk about the search funnel earlier. Simply by looking through a site, are you finding what you expect to find where you expect to find it? If not, this is often an indication. So sometimes it's not so much a matter of pulling the tools or using the right tools. It's also just a matter of being able to know what to look for.
Absolutely. And as a consumer, more than you think you do. Look at it through the lens of how would you find that business? Would you find that relevant? Is that engaging? Would it bring you closer to making a purchase? Among all of these targets, auto is a great topic right now. Not only searching for, new auto, but, how to, change my oil, or, things like that. How to maintain or make sure or get ready for a road trip. There are all kinds of relevant searches that happen around the auto industry that can be auto related. Restaurants, medical. Medical is a deep and wide category for organic SEO for sure. And there's a ton of content that is produced, and it does require quite a bit of expertise, research, and the ability to really make sure that you're standing out, because it's such a competitive field as well. Service-based businesses are great candidates for SEO. The SEO space for plumbers is highly competitive, but it can really help them stand out. We know that they spend thousands and thousands of dollars on SEM, but if they can really build a solid foundation on, instead of spending money on those paid ads, they can build a solid foundation with their organic, then that's a great way for them to stand out among their peers. Landscaping, HVAC, think about all of the different decisions that you would have to make around your life, your home, right? Your finances. Those are all great categories for organic SEO. Even the more complicated the decision, the more content you really need to write about it, because the more research that you're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to kind of think about is what industries require a good amount of research, right? What industries are conducting, are customers conducting a lot of searches around? You kind of, in an ideal world, you want somebody in a slightly niche space, somebody with a high ticket item or service, and somebody that requires maybe has a long sales cycle or requires a very well researched kind of decision in order to convert that person. So the last things that we'll touch on are just the SEO audits. We do SEO audits. I'm sure many of you know that. We conduct these audits for prospective clients, and they're very important tools for us to make sure that we have kind of in our toolbox, right? The reason being they're helping us expose these opportunities. Now, oftentimes, when after a while, and you're kind of fairly savvy with SEO, you're feeling confident with the way you kind of perceive things and kind of understand things within the realm of SEO, you can probably get pretty quick at looking at a site and realizing, okay, there's opportunity here, 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 here. But the audits that we have here utilize a series of some of the tools that we already mentioned earlier, as well as just the expertise of our team to ultimately expose what those opportunities are more specifically. And these are very constructive conversations. Sometimes you'll get into these discussions and realize, okay, SEO isn't maybe the best opportunity, but the vast majority of times we realize we learn something that's brand new to us or new to the customer. And that kind of that unknown factor is very interesting and intriguing, and ultimately we can provide a recommendation around where we need to go from there and how big that recommendation really is, and what it can actually do for them in the long term. So you can kind of inspire some level of excitement. So utilize these. They are complementary to all of our partners, and they are hopefully some of you are familiar with them. Our team's always available to support, right? Don't feel the need to kind of run into the wilderness with these on your own. We're here to help you out, to kind of navigate those waters, to expose the opportunities. The reality here, guys, is that these audits are high level, right? SEO is deep. SEO goes into many, many avenues, and content is one of the kind of the deepest realms within. So you kind of have to be prepared in order to speak to it, expose the opportunities, and ultimately be able to kind of, again, instill some level of interest to move forward. So as we kind of finish up here, I want to make sure that we answer whatever questions you guys have. Please drop them into the Q&A box, and we'll kind of monitor that as we go.
First question, Sam. If I, as an advertiser, am effectively driving traffic with SEM, how important is SEO as an addition?
Great question. So, the way that if you were to ask our SEM team what we should couple these products up with, they'll probably say SEO. And if you were to ask our SEO team what they should couple the product up with, we'll probably say SEM. These two 100% work in tandem. And we actually include this in our audit discussions as well, just to make sure that point gets across. If you're effectively driving traffic with SEM, that's wonderful, but you always need to remember that organic is oftentimes, maybe not in this case, but oftentimes the leading driver of traffic as a whole, right? So we need to ensure that we're nurturing that traffic and we're capturing that traffic as best we can, as opposed to exclusively paying for it. If we can drive traffic really, really well with an SEM campaign, that's an indication in a few different areas. One of which is that search engines are allowing our SEM ads to show up more prominently because we show the value, we show the relevance, we show the quality. SEO is we're kind of scored on a similar grading scale from the SEO side of things. So if we're effectively driving SEM traffic, we can probably drive the same on the SEO side of things. We just need to make sure that effort is being put in place effectively enough. The other benefit that we tend to see is that on the organic side, we can support, especially if you've got a large, let's say a large SEM budget. We're developing content, developing the site hierarchy, expanding the site hierarchy. We're developing essentially in a lot of ways landing pages for people to hit with an SEM or SEO campaign. And in some ways we can reduce budgets in certain areas of an SEM campaign or replace those budgets, right? Kind of pivot those budgets to new different areas. As always, Each scenario is very, very unique. So you want to kind of take that take that scenario with a fine-tooth comb and make sure you're kind of moving things in the right place. But you can absolutely open up more doors when you're kind of supplementing with SEO.
Great question. Any other questions?
While we're waiting on some of these questions to come in here, I think it's also important to kind of consider how content works alongside SEO. And we oftentimes will kind of think about, well, content is content, and you kind of interact with it and then it goes away, or you move on, right, as a searcher. The important thing to remember is that when you land into a content piece, you're reading this content, you're interacting, engaging with it, that is sending signals to search engines from an SEO perspective, right? If I come to a website and I start to interact and I'm asking, I'm gathering resourceful content for myself, that tells the search engine that people are getting what they need from this page, right? And that's ultimately where the benefit of rankings comes into play, because the search engine is going to see two scenarios. Okay, somebody lands on a page, they click on the first option, they don't get what they're looking for, they land back on the search engine and then click the second option, and then they close the browser. That means the second option probably gave them what they needed. So we need to kind of keep this type of thing in mind, these scenarios, these kind of workflows. Another question came in, it looks like, is the SEO audit complimentary service for qualified prospects? Qualified prospects, I wonder if we're referring to partners or clients. So this is absolutely a complimentary service for any of our partners. It is unlimited. So if you have anyone that's qualified, or that you may even aren't sure if they're qualified, as far as being an SEO prospect, you're welcome to submit for an SEO audit. All we require from you is a bit of upfront information. Obviously, we need to understand a dash about who that prospect is, and then we can dive in and conduct the audit. So yes, it is still complimentary in all scenarios as long as you're one of our partners.
And it can actually open the door. It can help you really figure out if that business needs SEO. So, not only can you do a little bit of research online yourself, but this can help you take that audit, which can be a lot of valuable. It's a valuable, it's a PowerPoint deck, and it helps you have a conversation with a business about what's going on. And our team is available to kind of walk through that with you, walk through that with your advertiser if needed over the phone, in order to really convey that information.
Yeah, we like that. we enjoy being part of those conversations. It's helpful for us, it's helpful for you guys, and we tend to see a lot of good discussion that come out of it. So please lean on us for those types of conversations.
I don't see any other questions. It looks like we're getting close to the top of the hour. We appreciate you guys so much showing up today and talking with us. Please reach out if there's anything that we can do for you or for one of your advertisers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys.